We have been talking backstage that we're very lucky. I don't normally sit like this. Oh, my legs are too chubby. We have been talking backstage that we are very lucky that we have so many different sectors represented. So we have a global tech vendor, an outsourcer, financial services, and a not-for-profit. So when the mics work, you're going to hear from a nice cross-section of our industry in an area that we were talking about backstage that has suddenly come to prevalence over the last couple of years, probably from the pandemic, when we had to en masse send hundreds of thousands of people home, and regardless of how many people you had in your contact center, you had to get to know them as individuals. You had to get to know their home life, where they were at, what kind of adjustments you needed to make. And all of a sudden, we were trying to pinpoint, where did this word vulnerability become such a part of our common vernacular? So it's a fascinating subject. And now the microphones are working, hopefully I can stop filling time. So over to introductions, please.
Thanks, Martin. So I'm ML Mako, that's short for Mary Lou Mako. I am a Avaya corporate board of director, and I'm also I'm doing two roles. So I am now the Chief Experience and Chief Revenue Officer for Avaya. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Liz Millington. I work for Essentials Contact Centres and I head up their digital transformation teams.
Hi, I'm Kelly Shippen, Head of Contact Centres for Leeds Building Society.
Given the microphone doesn't work. I'm Alan Moses. I am the Director of IT and Data for Voiceability.
I think before we get into some of the aspects of technology and the different sectors, I think we have to start with the definition. What is the definition of vulnerability and how does it impact our colleagues and our customers? And I want to start with you, Liz, on you were sharing some things earlier around what you do with data and how data has allowed you to kind of draw some conclusions. And so what is it that you guys are doing?
Yeah, so over the last couple of years, we've been actually looking at defining, well, what does vulnerability actually mean? So we have been utilising our insights tools, really building out on all the different topics of really where do you go when you're looking at vulnerability. And you've got that definition of, yes, there are customers that do have their physical ailments. They really need that support because of what they require in their life. You've also got the times where you've actually just got circumstantial. At that point in time, there is a vulnerability within that person due to the circumstance that they are in. But you've also, and especially grown massively since the pandemic as well, is that you've seen the financial vulnerabilities. And that, unfortunately, is something that we have now seen in our data. That is growing more and more. But because we are able to start to identify these in our data, and we are building up and layering up these topics in more detail every month at this point in time, we can then help towards our support of our agents on how they need to be dealing with this different clientele that are coming through and how you do need to be able to speak to that clientele and homing in on those processes of what you need to do for the support.
That's great. I mean, it's a fascinating area. And Kelly, for you in your industry, for your employees and for your customers, how do you define it? How do you work around this?
So I think Leeds Building Society is a purpose-led organisation. Our purpose is to put home ownership within reach of more people, generation after generation. And getting onto the property ladder is harder now than it has been in the last 150 years. So in order for us to fulfil that purpose, when you lift the lid over how hard it is to either get onto the property ladder or stay within a home, actually, the vulnerability comes through loud and clear with all of those that haven't been able to achieve that yet. And I think from our organisation's point of view, whether it's financial, whether it's physical, whether it's mental, whether it's just dealing with the challenge that you get from financial services, every customer brings something. And I think it's just knowing, a little bit like mental health, we all have it. It's just whether or not it's high or it's low. I think vulnerability is very similar. We all go through it for different reasons, and I think being able to respond to that. And I think, to pick up on your point about colleagues, It's been talked about many times today that, if you look after colleagues, they look after customers. So we have a huge focus on colleague vulnerability. In fact, that's probably where we focus more of our effort. Neurodiversity, financial vulnerability, education, all of those things. And we've seen real examples of how focusing on colleagues has directly influenced customer.
Sorry, did you want to say?
Yeah, I love those answers, and I just wanted to maybe some people are wondering how the concept of vulnerability really intersects with technology. Like, how does that all come together? And I think you guys did a really great job explaining it. And I think some of the things that we think about is when we think about vulnerability, we're thinking about it in the context of like a human factor, because that's really what we're talking about. And as we work with a lot of our clients, there's like a common conversation that kind of emerges. And it's a lot about, most companies look at the most valuable assets they have in their company are really the people in the company. And when you think about contact centers, it almost becomes this epicenter of human interactions delivered by individuals that have to really feel safe and have to feel like they're in an environment where they can succeed. So that's a lot about the vulnerability and the technology that often becomes part of that conversation. I think we heard a lot about most of this today, is a lot about new technologies like artificial intelligence and what that really does for the contact centers or the agent experience, and how that leads into this concept of vulnerability. So you've worked in contact centers. I didn't tell you, I did too, going through college, so it's a secret, right? But I did that as well.
Sure.
So one of the key things there is a lot about when you're in that environment as an agent, sometimes you can feel like really isolated in the environment because you're dealing with really complicated issues at times and problems. And the value that some of this technology brings is, like, for example, AI, you have this now access to experts and expertise, and you start to feel part of a team, and you're able to now do this complicated job in a very different way, and you're in a safer environment. So we like to try to connect through the human factors and people working with people, and then translate that into how do you create this team-like environment where people can succeed and really work as one on behalf of their customers. So it's just a context on a little bit of the technology.
I love that, and we'll talk again about technology. You touched on a few things there that I think, Alon, you would want to talk about, and you have a view around the language that we use. Language and words are important, and well, what is that?
Yeah, so our communications team are regularly reviewing the language that we use to describe ourselves and our clients, and we've moved away from talking about people being vulnerable, because it's not a person that's vulnerable, it's the situation and the circumstances that they find themselves in can make them vulnerable. If I put you in a room with a lion, you're pretty vulnerable, but that doesn't make you a vulnerable person. It's not that we're trying to deny that vulnerability exists, it does, in many shapes and guises. It's that we want to shift the focus toward, rather than being, it's about them, it's about all of us. And so we've stopped using those terms. We talk about people in situations at risk, or people at risk, or ideally, it's just a person. Everybody's a person. And from that perspective, we try and treat all of those communications that we have, that is potentially a person that could be at risk, that is in a vulnerable situation and needs that support. And that can be clients, but equally that can be our internal staff, teams working on the contact centre. Especially our teams are they're all home working. They don't have that camaraderie of being in a contact centre, sitting around a table together.
Do you think this evolves then to, we look at, we're going to have some methodology here that's specific to vulnerable customers or colleagues, and you look at it and go, well, actually, shouldn't we just be applying this to everyone?
For us, yes, it's everybody, and we're a voice and rights charity. Everybody needs to be heard. Anything that we can do to help a person get their voice and their needs heard across is vital. Doesn't matter who you are.
Liz, ML brought us onto and touched upon some aspects of technology and how technology runs alongside this hand in hand. What have you guys been doing, and what have been the benefits of what you've done?
One of our core focuses is that we've now partnered with Iris Clarity. It's a fantastic noise reduction product as well. So when you are actually having this conversation, if you think that some of these people who are calling into the contact centre, they'd probably be a little bit nervous in the first place to even contact the contact centre, because this is not something that they really want to do. They've done this because it's become out of a necessity. But when you have actually then the opportunity to be able to talk to someone, what you want to be able to do is you want to be able to hear. You want to be able to vision. You want to be able to understand absolutely everything that you are saying to that person at that point in time, and vice versa back from the agent themselves. They want to be able to help you to their best abilities. And it sounds such a small thing, but being able to actually reduce all of that noise reduction that happens all around the room, you can't hear anything else at all. You are then homing in directly on just that conversation at that moment in time, is allowing you then to be able to, as an agent, offer the best experience you can out to the customer. But then it relaxes you because you are getting exactly what you need from that conversation. And this has been such a huge focus on our business. And we are now able to take this, and we've been to expos, and we've actually had live agents sitting, working in the middle of an expo, taking calls. And no one knows any different, because they've got so much attention just to that one person at that point in time. And that is able to cover so many boundaries just under that one piece of technology.
And from that kind of localized, in your own environment type of situation, Mel, I just want to come to you and think about the global kind of, your remit is across the globe. Do you see kind of cultural differences when it comes to the application of technology to assist in the vulnerable space?
Not really, actually, because I think there's a common purpose that all customers have, which is, it goes back to agent wellness, right? And I think the last presenter did a really nice job talking about how important that is. And when we're working with our customers globally, and we have a number of them, that's really now a very top of mind part of the conversation. So it quickly moves from what you would expect in terms of technologies and metrics and things like that. And of course you talk about that because that's pretty much the table stakes, but it does start to move a different direction, which is about agent wellness and what is it that companies like ours are really doing that is thinking outside of the box, and starting to solve that problem is really important. And I think we heard from the last presenter that, and I'm going to assume that most people in this audience, this is probably something that you think about a lot, which is and this kind of blew me away, statistics, is that the turnover in agents is 30 to 50% turnover in agents. And that's huge. So there aren't very many, I think, jobs that you have that percentage of turnover. And that largely has to do with the jobs that they're in and the environments they work in. So agent wellness is a very big topic. Now, one of the things that we're trying to do, and a lot of companies are trying to do this, is really, again, lean into that area. And we've launched things like recent capabilities around. A big part for us is enter the market with our customers with open platforms, and many of you are aware of what that is. That allows customers to kind of build capabilities that make sense for their business. So things like agent wellness is a set of applications that you can actually build into the agent environment. So we're launching some pilots around this whole concept of agent wellness through an agent wellness indicator. It's powered by AI, It goes beyond just like the sentiment, like how does somebody feel in the conversation? What do you hear in the conversation? To being able to extract 60 to 70 different emotions. Now, you have to, obviously do this in a very transparent way and have, agents aware of what's happening. But as you go through this kind of new way of thinking about this, it starts to surface things like, look, somebody who's in a really difficult conversation, they may need from a supervisor time to take a break. That's okay to do because you'd rather them be in a better state of mind because they're going to be better at what they're doing and their customers will be more delighted. Or maybe you change them into different cues and shifts. But that kind of knowledge comes through with, I always think about it as technology for the good. It's not just technology for technology. And it has to lean into real world problems and think about things differently. So agent wellness and vulnerability is a big topic for us.
And that's fascinating because I know, Kelly, that kind of the focus on your team, and you're very keen to talk about neurodiversity. And am I right in thinking you guys have won awards for the provisions that you put out for your team and how engaged they are with it and how they respond? Can you just talk to that?
Yeah, so in the span of 12 months, we went from having one colleague who had kind of came forward to talk about their neurodiversity to 15% of our contact centre. And I think statistics say 1 in 7 will have a neurodiversity, and a lot of people are being diagnosed later on, but we've managed to create a culture of openness, transparency, and I think a commitment to actually supporting colleagues. And I think the more we've done that, the more they've helped educate others, the more they've shared. And I know we talked, just the other day about, the call that you used to get, and it was, I think you called them the screamer. And, going back in years when you had a customer and it was a really tough call. But I think actually now we look at those calls in a really different light. Yes, some customers are just unhappy because they've had a really poor service, but sometimes actually there's a lot more to it. And the patience and the empathy our team have. And I think we see a fundamentally different customer experience now. And the colleagues are driving change, and sometimes it's the simplest things. Our data tells us that our top 20 callers all have a vulnerability. They ring us every single day, and we tell them every single day they still have £3 in their account. But that is their routine, and therefore we support that. We've created a free phone number for those people. And one of our more neurodiverse colleagues said, actually, some customers struggle with any kind of IVR routing. So we've removed it, heard earlier, from Atom Bank straight through. We have a line dedicated for customers who struggle with that. But the colleagues are driving a huge part of that process. And I think the other thing, if anybody's not started on this journey, is the personal satisfaction you get from it. And we were very lucky to win an award, but our colleagues have talked about the transformation in their lives as a result of this. People who had very little self-worth, didn't think they would ever be able to get on the career ladder or start in an environment like they work with us, and they absolutely love it. And that can see permutates through the whole contact centre.
That's lovely. It's great to hear the impact that everything we do has on people, real life stories that will stay with them for years. And to unlock that, we know, don't we, that one of the things that our agents will tell us is having to navigate through multiple systems, having to log on 6 or 7 different times, having to navigate around knowledge bases that are all spread out is one of the biggest challenges, whilst also trying to be present for customers, whilst also managing where you are at the moment as a person. And Alon, you've seen some changes based on kind of streamlining that.
Yeah, so about 9 months ago, we went live with, we use Salesforce as our case management system, and we rolled out Service Cloud Voice. That brought, instead of having separate systems for web chat, for case management, for our contact center system, it was all in one place. And we've seen a number of different impacts and changes from that simple change of you're not having to navigate multiple systems. There's simple things like not needing to synchronize status across, right, I'm on a web chat or I'm on a phone call, so I can't take a web chat. But that's had some impacts that we weren't expecting necessarily. We've seen a 50% increase in our retention rate of contact center staff, just in part from simplification of systems. And then I found out about this morning when I was talking to some of my colleagues that are here, that actually where we are losing staff, we're not losing them out the business. We're keeping them in the business and they're going to other roles within Voicability, which means we're not losing that knowledge, we're not losing those skills, and that makes a tremendous difference to the level of service that we can give to our clients. We've also seen, because of the speed of the integration, our average handling time has reduced by about 20 seconds on a call, but the lead-in time to identification, to working out who you're talking to and confirming details and tying them in and looking up has been reduced so much that actually we're spending longer on the phone with our clients talking about the things that are meaningful and important to them. And that just gives them a better experience, and we're able to focus more of that. The agents are able to spend more time focusing on the importance of the conversation that's going on and less time on the keeping the system up to date and filling out boxes and ticking things.
I think that's great, and it's just a real nice example of that kind of application. I just want to talk about, I mentioned at the outset, all of the different kind of sectors we have here on the panel. But ML, you get to see far more as well through all of your interaction with your clients. To what extent do they ask you for your tips around access to vulnerability in terms of customers, helping them, those types of things?
That's a great question. They do ask that, and I think in our customer conversations, we like to really enter those conversations first from sharing best practices and sharing what other customers are thinking about, and really helping to bring some thought leadership into the discussion on topics like vulnerability, for instance, and empathy, and how that does really take center stage, especially in this environment. And a lot of that really kind of ties to, we think about, we're all in this in one way or another, that the speed of change that we're all dealing with here, especially in this environment, and the technologies that are emerging on a moment-by-moment basis is fairly fatiguing for most companies and most individuals that are in this part of the technology stack. And so there's a lot of stuff that's out there. Even Gartner actually has recently launched a course where they're taking CIOs through this whole speed of change fatigue and helping them refocus their real kind of efforts around key things like vulnerability and what's happening in their business environment that's impacting their customer experiences, that ultimately impacts their brand and market. So the conversations have really evolved and shifted. Our conversations are largely about that. We look at the technology as an enabler to the business, not as that's what we're here to discuss and drain it and things like that. I mean, it's really about enablers. And we like to work with our clients in a way that we don't create, the reason to chase the technology. It's really that the technology should come to you and it should be relevant to what you're trying to do. So a lot of conversations have evolved. They're definitely different than what they've been in the past. I've had the fortune to be in this part of the industry for about 20 years, and they're different from 20 years ago, as you and I probably know, to where they are today. And I think that's really positive, and I think that makes a lot of sense for our customers and, in general, the industry.
I agree. When I think of this topic title, I think it's a real positive demonstration of the evolution of our industry from a technological point of view, from how we understand people, that we have far more considerations for how we're showing up and how we support people, better support customers. Even though this is comfier than any chair I have at home, I'm gonna stand up, because in the last few minutes, we've got about 5 minutes, you've got a brilliant panel here, and I would invite questions. You must have them. Has anyone got a question for anyone on the panel in this area that I know we talk about a lot? Here we go. You, sir. Handsome chap, front. Oh, not that one. I jest. Royster
Thank you very
Doyster.
much. Tell my wife that when I get home. Afternoon. I wonder if what you guys' thoughts would be on, would it be a healthy thing to do to differentiate between vulnerabilities which have an impact and a direct need versus vulnerabilities that might just require agents to deal with the customer in a different way, perhaps. So, disability which requires you to receive your comms in a different format versus, something going on in a customer's life which you might need to bear in mind. So an agent can open a CRM, for example, and see, okay, this customer's recently been through a bereavement. I may need to show extra empathy, check on how they are, make sure I avoid certain terms, for example, versus, okay, this customer needs their comms in Braille, for example, doesn't impact me on this particular call. So would that be a healthy thing to do to differentiate between those almost active vulnerabilities, for want of a better word, and other vulnerabilities that might just be more of an interest piece or might come into play in a different part of the customer journey?
Great question.
I think that kind of ties in a little bit with some of our research that we've done over kind of the last couple of years and really segregating out the vulnerabilities, because everyone needs a little bit of different training to really help to nail down exactly how you treat someone as a complete and utter individual as well. And you're right, and this is why we've kind of now homed in a little bit more into circumstance, because your vulnerability under circumstance could be very short term in comparison to if you have a physical ailment or a diagnosis for anything. You need to have that flexibility in your training to understand how you need to deal with these people, with anybody at all. Everyone should be dealt with completely unique, but actually driving down into those different types of vulnerabilities allows you then to have that agent ability to flex between how you have that conversation, and drawing that information from our insights and analytics to flag the type of vulnerability that you are dealing with at that point in time allows you to have that empowerment as that agent as well, to be able to continue on with that day. And actually, that individual that you're talking to at that moment in time realises that this is a personal conversation that you're having with them. It's not just a generic conversation that is tailored for them at that point. So yes, I do agree that actually having everything really down to the nitty-gritty, I would say, really helps to prolong each conversation as needed.
Thank you. And debonair chap just there.
Martin, that's very kind of you, and thank
You're
you.
welcome.
In return, you do a great podcast, so thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Vulnerability, it really chimes. And this is a tricky question, so forgive me, and I think Kelly's gone near it, but...
I think we've run out of time.
But look, how do we, or can we, educate the customer or society with regard to human vulnerability and unacceptable behaviour?
Great question. Who wants to pick that up? Kelly.
So I think it's already happening. I think so in society, vulnerability is more talked about, it's more discussed. I think we see today the level of vulnerability we deal with has doubled. Now, has vulnerability doubled? Probably not. Actually, just the transparency, the willingness to talk about it, I think, has shifted fundamentally. And I think, there are a number of programs in our industry which promote, how to protect colleagues against certain behaviours. But I also think there's a responsibility on us to make sure we understand what's driving the behaviour. Yes, there's absolutely a line, you know, and there's some obvious examples, you know, racism and all of those types of things, which absolutely we've got no tolerance for. But I think we're on that journey of education, and I think probably all of the people in here have got a role to play. I think CCMA, Institute of Customer Service, I think everybody is trying to champion that, and I think the more we do, I think the more clarity that will create for customers too.
Thank you very much. Please give it up for a wonderful panel. Thank you very much. Thank you.